It's almost 4 o'clock. We got a couple more minutes, but I will be starting the class very shortly. Thanks for jumping on. Mr. Tony, how are you, sir? Congratulations this weekend. That's really great news that you did so well. Really glad to hear it. Monty, I had a feeling you might show up. Thank you for joining us. We got some great information here tonight. I'm going to get started here in about 1 minute. I'm going to just allow 1 more minute to let people start getting on. And I won't waste your time. We'll get started. We're kind of doing it early. I want to make sure that you guys out there on the East Coast are taken care of. I know I tend to start a lot of my things later, like around 6 or 7 o'clock Pacific time, and I've been getting a lot of people wanting to jump on, and so I decided to go just a little bit early, and we'll get going here. Chris, thank you for joining. Appreciate you. Oh, thank you, Greg. Man, that means so much to me. Getting that word out really makes a big difference, and I'm hoping that I'm be able to start doing some work for them and get some baits in their hands. And I'm sure you didn't give away all your secrets, but I appreciate you handing out my name. Okay, we're going to get started here. So let me turn this camera around. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining. Craig, thanks for joining. Today is Tuesday, and we are going to be talking about crawdads today. I know some of you have heard this this class, because I do live classes. I'll do it for fishing clubs. I've done it for several over the years. And so some of you have heard some of this before. I've added some more information. Let me tell you why I do this. And it's the same reason I got into painting. I want to be a better fisherman. I think that learning about what the fish eat makes all the difference in the world when it comes time to actually going out and finding them. And whether we're matching the hatch, whether you're matching crayfish or bait fish, it's key to the success I have. I know growing up, I primarily fished clear water impoundments. I grew up in California, so I'm used to fishing the Berryessas and the Shastas and the Lake Don Pedros, where a lot of times in the summertime, you can see down 10, 20 feet. What actually got me started painting lures was I fished a tournament, the U.S. Open down at Lake Mead, and I was floored at how clear the water was. I mean, you could see down in 25 feet of water, you could see the bushes down there. And I was like, how on earth are these bass going to eat these lures that I'm seeing on the shelves? And the answer was they weren't. For my own confidence sake, I wasn't going to be. I didn't feel there was very few colors that I thought, I could probably catch them on that. And I met somebody down there at one of the local tackle shops there in Henderson, and he said, "Hey, there's some tilapia here in the lake. We've got a pattern that mimics them really well. And it's custom painted by a local guy." And I was like, well, let's try it. So we tried it, and I had a little bit of success with it. And I went, I'm not seeing any tilapia here. But what I am seeing is I'm seeing a lot of crayfish, and I'm seeing a lot of threadfin shad, lots of them. I mean, big, giant schools of them. Now, this was end of late 90s. But I went down pre-fish for 10 days, caught a ton of stripers, learned a lot about the lake, and I realized that I needed to have some confidence lures going into the tournament. And it's the first big tournament I'd ever fished. So I came back, and I had a few lures that the stripers had just absolutely demolished. And so I happened to be working at a tackle shop at the time, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, what if you painted the lures to look realistic?" And I went, that's a good idea. It would give me confidence when I'm down there. And sure enough, so what I do is I picked some of my favorite lures, that I knew would work in clear water. They happened to be mostly the Rapala shad wraps, like an SR7, SR9, because the bait that I was looking at the size of the shad, and the shad were about 4 inches or so. And so what I did was I took my very first pattern. What I did was I painted it white, and then I did a pearl white over the top of it, and then I took a lead pencil and I ground it down and I scraped it across the back to kind of give it that gray back. And I took a yellow highlighter and I highlighted down that little yellow line down the middle, and I put that little black dot on the side. And I thought it looked really, really good. It didn't. In hindsight's always 20/20, right? So I started looking at it, and I felt so confident in that bait. I had a selection of crankbaits that would cover the depths of where I was finding the fish. I also made up some spinner baits that I hand tied them. I took skirts and I started peeling skirts apart to try to get the exact skirts that would look like threadfin. And then I started and then the jigs. I would tie up the jigs to make sure they looked just like the crawdads that were having spit up in the boat. And I had so much confidence that I started painting baits after that tournament. That tournament, I finished 20th as an AM, and I felt so confident when I came back. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do this. And so I've been doing it ever since then. Since 1997, I've been painting lures to look as realistic as possible. And I've been getting better and better over the years. And in 2015, actually, I moved up to the Pacific Northwest in 2014. In 2015, I got the opportunity. Now I get to share this with you guys. And so I really enjoy doing this, and I really appreciate it, all the support over the years. I'm going to continue to do this, and so I want to bring this information to you about the crayfish. I spent a lot of time about, so I started the business up here, and I realized we don't have all the crayfish up here that I had in California. I was used to that I thought that bass pretty much keyed in on red swamp craws and threadfin shad. And I knew a little bit of bluegills and stuff like that, but I didn't realize how much more there was to the forage base. Well, I came up here and nothing looked familiar to me. And so I started catching crawdads, and it dawned on me as I'm sitting there painting that first Tualatin craw. I went, you know what? This is important to learn. It's going to help me be a better fisherman, and it's going to help others to have more confidence when they're on the water. It's going to help me to have more confidence. I was fishing all brand new waters up here. I had no idea, what was what, and I kind of got tired of listening to the dock talk, and I know most of you know what I mean. So I did the deep dive into crayfish, and I started with just the local crayfish that we have up here, which are called signal crawdads. And I started going out and catching them because I wanted to put them in a dish, and I wanted to paint them to look exactly like what I was seeing. Thanks, guys. So I wanted to paint them to look exactly like what I was doing. But I would go to one river and I'd find some, and I found this one river. In fact, I'll tell you where it was. It was in the Molalla River. I found this little swimming hole, and my kids and I would go down there, and we'd just go swimming and catch crawdads. And I'd catch, 30 or 40 of them. Well, I'd see 6 or 7 different colors depending on where I was on the section of the Molalla. And it made no sense to me, because what I was taught when I learned to bass fish was crawdads start off dark in the winter, then they turn olive or green, and then they move to brown in the summer, and then they change to red in the fall. This is what I was taught. And so I fished for many, many years bass fishing, thinking that that's how I had to approach it. I'd do my black blues in the winter. In the springtime, I'd either be throwing black blue or I'd be throwing like a green pumpkin. And then during the summertime, I was throwing nothing but browns. And in the fall, I would concentrate on almost all reds. And then there was the reds. I grew up around the Delta, so you're always throwing red. But that was my mindset. So I'm catching all these crayfish, and I'm seeing like all these different colors of crawdads on the same day. And I went, and I'm going to show you some of these pictures. Now, I'm having a few technical difficulties, but I think I found a workaround. So I'm going to be showing you some pictures of some of these crayfish, and you're going to see what I mean. But I'm going to wait till I get down a little bit further in the presentation. But this was I had to do the deep dive. I had to understand why were there multiple colors of crayfish when they were supposed to be, well, this happened to be July. They're supposed to be brown. And I caught some brown crawdads, but I was also catching red ones. I was also catching blue ones. And it made no sense. So I started an email campaign of trying to reach out to crayfish biologists. Now, crayfish biologist is called an astacologist. Funny name, but great information to know. So I started Googling astacology in the United States. And I had a couple of guys come up. So I started sending emails. Well, one of them called me because I wrote, hey, I've got some questions about crayfish. I understand that you study them. Is there any way that I could interview you? I told him I'm a lure painter here in Oregon, and I just want to do a better job at painting them and understand them better. And so one of them finally called me and he said, you know what? I'm out in the field, but I would love to talk with you. Let's talk on Monday morning. And I'm like, yeah. So I spent the whole weekend coming up with questions and yeah, okay. You know that story. A lot of you do. Excuse me. So Monday morning rolls around. We have a conversation and he blew my mind. I asked him, I said, here, he goes, well, what do you know so far? And I explained to him, and then I explained to him what I was finding, and he goes, whoever taught you that, you need to go back in time, smack him in the head, and say, no, that's wrong. You don't teach that anybody else, to anyone else. And so he says, just pretty much take whatever you learned, throw it away, and let's start fresh. And I was like, oh, thank you. Mind blown. And I'm going to blow your mind today. So, for those of you that don't know me, we've got quite a few people online now. Just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Brian Chapman. I'm the owner of Willamette Weapon Lures, and I am setting a new standard of excellence in custom painted crankbaits. I paint lures that are the next best thing to live bait. It's, in some parts of the country, it doesn't matter what color, it doesn't really matter all the little details that you put on a crankbait because you got really dirty water. But for a lot of us that are fish clear water impoundments, especially out here on the West Coast, or I see Marty Lawrence on here, fishing in the South, in Arizona and Nevada and Southern California, and fishing on the Pro Tour. It's crucial, especially when you have high pressure and really clear water, to be able to have something that's really lifelike. You don't want that fish hesitating. I've seen it so many times where you're reeling in a crankbait and that fish is kind of following it and they go, I don't think so. And they turn around and swim off. So annoying. So when I paint lures to look realistic, it makes all the difference in the world. I feel like I hook up more, I catch better quality fish because they're not as gun shy when they see something that they normally see in the water. And it's not just crayfish, it's baitfish, bluegill, trout, whatever it happens to be. It makes a difference, especially when you're fishing clear water. Now, I'm going to be taking questions, but I'm going to be doing questions kind of after each segment. So the first section we're going to be talking about is why it's so important. After this one segment, we're going to go back and you can feel free to ask questions on anything that I covered. And then when we get into the next segment, I'll wait till the next segment because I have a tendency to want to just read every single line because I enjoy talking with you. Marty, thanks for joining. Greg, again, I appreciate you being here, brother. Ray, thank you so much for joining. And I know you've been jumping on our live sales. If you guys are interested in grabbing some of these really lifelike looking crawdads, I'm going to offer you, just because you jumped on live with me, use the code CRAW, C-R-A-W at checkout, and you'll get a discount off of your order today. Really appreciate you guys joining me. Let's get going. Okay, so why are crawdads so important? First, number one reason is they're calorically beneficial to bass. They don't have to work so hard to be able to root out a crawdad and eat it. It's not like a baitfish. Baitfish, they tend to have to either stalk or chase, and I kind of look at it like a jungle cat, right? Jungle cats are only successful so many times. Out of, say, 10 hunts, they're only successful one. Well, I'm imagining that, bass is the same thing when they're chasing baitfish. they're only successful so many times. And so what I look at is I'm going, what would be easier for those fish to eat? Something that doesn't move very fast, or something that doesn't move, that well. So crawdads are perfect. So they're calorically beneficial. They are abundant in many of the waters. Now, they're not always available, and I'll get into that when we start talking about seasonal habits. But when they're available, they're calorically beneficial. During the springtime, they're calcium rich. And what I found is, and I've actually talked to a couple biologists about this, bass need calcium to have a successful spawn. It's for the bass eggs. When they lay the eggs, they want the eggs to be stronger, and the calcium and the nutrients that they get from crayfish help those eggs to be stronger and last longer, for during the spawn. That springtime egg production. The other reason, and this doesn't necessarily have to do with the bass fishing so much, but crawdads are omnivorous and they eat everything. They're like they clean up. They're kind of like the crustacean form of a catfish. They just kind of clean up everything off the bottom. They eat they eat both plants and animals, and so they are very beneficial for the waters that they live in, and they're delicious too, by the way. we love going out and catching crawdads. Anybody have any questions so far? John, thanks for joining. Appreciate you joining me all the way from Missouri. Okay, so if there's no questions, that's kind of a short segment, let's move on to the next segment. Now, this next segment, we're going to talk about some species of crawdad. And the reason why I want to talk to you about species of crawdad is because there are species of crawdad spread out all across the country, and they're not all the same. There are some dominant ones that, like for instance, the first one that I'm going to show you is the northern crayfish, or the virile crayfish, that some of you know. The native range of it is fairly large, but the introduced range is even larger. And so knowing what kind of crayfish you have in your body of water, it helps me. Like, I'll give you a personal example before I get going here. I know that in the Pacific Northwest, the signal crayfish is the dominant species of crawdad. And don't worry, I'm going into color in a little bit. But I know that they look a certain way, and that on the backs of the claws, they have a white or a blue joint, and underneath, they've got a color of claw that is hereditary. So I know that there's certain aspects of a color of crankbait that I want for the Pacific Northwest. I want to make sure that there's a spot that shows the claws. I want to be able to have something that represents the joint on the back. I want to show that transition of color. But in Eastern Washington, this virile crayfish has completely taken over the ecosystem over there. And they've outcompeted all of the signal crayfish, almost all the signal crayfish. I actually had a chance to talk with a biologist when I was at Potholes. That was over a month ago. I was there at the end of August. And I said, so we started chatting at the dock. And I said, hey, what ratio of crawdads is there in this lake? And he goes, you are the first person who's ever asked me that. And he goes, why are you asking me this? And I said, well, I'm a lure painter and I'm really interested. I said, I paint lures to match the crawdads that are known to be in here. And he goes, well, what do you think it is? And I said, well, signal crawdads are kind of bigger and stronger, but the virile crayfish, I know that they breed more prolifically. He said, try 90%, maybe closer to 95% of the crawdads here in Potholes are this northern crayfish. And I'm going to show it to you right now. Okay, this is the virile crayfish. Okay, they come in, I'm getting ahead of myself. I promise to talk about colors in a little bit here. But this is the virile crayfish. And the way you can identify them is, in particular, these yellow dots on the claws. And they tend to have bluish to turquoise colored claws. The actual bodies on them can vary in color. And in fact, I'm going to show you, so, when I get into starting to talk about crawdad color, I'm going to show you some different versions of the northern crayfish that I've found. And this is the one that I've matched so far. I actually call it Norm. But in our neck of the woods out here out west, this species of crawdad has been found in Northern California. In fact, I'm going to show you. Everyone see the map? Okay, see this map right here? Everything in yellow right here is the native range of the crayfish. Okay, everything in red has been where it's been introduced. This is probably the most widespread type of or species of crawdad across the entire country. In California, it's primarily in Northern California. This particular map isn't the greatest one. I have another one, and like I said, I had to do this at the last minute because I actually had green screen photos ready to go so I could show you on a green screen, but for some reason, can't get the green screen to work on here, but I'm not going to let it stop me. Anyway, this map is a little bit older, but it has actually moved, these crayfish have actually started moving into eastern Washington and western Idaho. Coeur d'Alene, Lake Roosevelt, Banks, Moses, Potholes, and the upper regions of the Columbia River all the way through eastern Washington. This has become the dominant species of crawdad. And this crawdad has actually, based on my conversation with Washington Department of Fish and Game, they've actually caught these down as far as the Umatilla Pool. And so, mind blown. These crawdads will spread out and they will take over ecosystems. So if you have this species of crawdad in your waters, I do have a color match for it, and I'm working on a couple of others. I will be talking about crawdad color, which most of you are going to go absolutely apeshit bananas over. But I want to keep talking about these real quick. So this is the northern crayfish, or some of you may know this as the virile crayfish. Okay, this one, I've been doing lives almost every day on TikTok. And every time I show this pattern, this is the rusty crayfish. Okay, I show this pattern on TikTok, and everyone goes apeshit crazy over it. And it's because if you look at the map, this is the original range of the rusty crayfish. It's kind of the Ohio River Valley. But because it's used very commonly in classrooms as teaching aids and also in bait buckets and stuff like that, it's been spread out all over the Great Lakes. In fact, this map is old too. It's gone all the way up to Maine, all through the East Coast. It's in eastern Oregon in the John Day River. And because the John Day River dumps into the Columbia, my guess is that they are actually in the Columbia River. But there's swaths of land where you got rivers and lakes that have rusty crayfish in them. And because they're here and these lakes flush down through the river systems, you have these rusty crayfish can spread, and they spread almost as fast as the northern crayfish. It's insane. And you can identify these rusty crayfish because they actually call them rusty crayfish because they have a rust mark right here on the back. In fact, I'm going to show you on a lure so you can see it just a little bit better. Okay, this is my rusty crayfish pattern, and they have little orange dots, or like little orange joints on the legs. They have red stripes along or rusty colored stripes. I've seen red, I've seen rust, and I've seen actually even a type of orange along the tail right here. And then this is the rusty mark that they call it. That's why they call it a rusty crayfish. And these things are so widespread, and so many people have reported seeing these things that when I go on TikTok, for instance, I see so many people going, I have that crawdad in my body of water. How can I get my hands on that thing? It absolutely is amazing, the overwhelming excitement that I see for this crayfish. And I've personally caught my biggest smallmouth on this pattern. In fact, in that lure that's in the photo. That's my depth charge. That's my personal best. I happen to get it out of the John Day River, but I'll tell you what, if I ever am able to go back east and start fishing some of those rivers, some of those lakes up in the like the Great Lakes, I'm gonna have everything painted that way because I know that this is a really widespread crawdad across much of the country. Okay, the next one, and this is kind of the third one that is the most prolific in the United States that I found. This is the Louisiana swamp craw. And there are sections of California that have them, including the California Delta. They are very well known in Southern California, Nevada, Arizona, all through Texas. Let's take a look at that map. See all these little red spots right here? That's where they've been introduced, because this is usually what you see when you see crawdad boils. Okay, these are the type of crayfish that they usually do. But Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, all up here through the East Coast, the Carolinas, and going up into New York, parts of the Great Lakes, you've got this species of crawdad. And again, they breed prolifically. And I see them in multiple different colors. Here's 2 different versions that I paint. I'm actually working on 3 more that I found. But these are very, very common colors that you probably see in your local waters. I get a lot of requests for this pattern for guys fishing California, especially from like in the San Joaquin Valley, in the Delta, and going south. I got a bunch of requests for this for guys that are fishing. In fact, they're fishing Mojave and Lake Mead. This is the dominant species of crawdad in that body of water. Don't worry, we are going to talk about color, but this is generally what they look like. Take a look at your bodies of water. I'd be willing to bet that you've got one of these species of crawdad living in your body of water. It may be a different color, and like I said, we're going to talk about color, but it's really helpful to be able to identify what species of crawdad you have. Out here, one of the main features of the Louisiana swamp craws is they tend, not always, but they tend to have really brightly colored claws underneath. I've seen them red. I've seen them bone color. I've seen them several different colors, but red is probably the most dominant. And then the tops of the claws tend to have really big red bumps on them. And the color of the claw can be really dark with the red dots on it. And so knowing what species of crawdad you have in your body of water is really important. From a match the hatch standpoint, whether you're matching it on a jig, whether you're matching it on a twin tail grub, on a crankbait, whatever you're trying to match it on, it really pays off to know what species you have. All right, the next one, and Greg, you're gonna love this one. This one is called the calico crayfish. In fact, the guy that originally sent to me this crawdad was Greg Toney. But I found out that this crawdad right here is extremely common across the Midwest. There are little sections in Idaho and Colorado that have these crawdads as well, but you can see that the dominant forage is really all across the Midwest here, and even going up into the East Coast. If you fish any of those states, in fact, I'm sure it's wider spread than that, because I know Greg fishes a lot of waters that are down in West Virginia and Virginia, and so I know that they've spread out. But again, this is probably another one of those really widespread crayfish species. And like I said, we'll be talking about color. But what I notice on these ones is they have 2 identifying features. One, they've got a little orange tip on the claws, and they also have kind of a I think that's why they call them calico, but they're like multicolored. And if you look at them, I'm going to show you some of the detail I put into this. Greg really did a great job of sending me, pictures of that crawdad so that I could really match it really carefully. And what it showed me was that they have multiple colors on the sides, and it has a lot of detail on the, like kind of a leopard print almost on the back. It allows it to hide really well. in those bodies of water, in those areas of the country, that species of crawdad was naturally selected to survive. And I think it's because of the colorations on it. Greg, yeah, you did a great job, man. And I know you've done really, really well with that pattern in those bodies of water that you fish. Okay, so that's another one that is very common. I don't get that many questions about that out here on the West Coast because we don't have them. But in the Midwest, this is another one that a lot of people look at and go, whoa, I've got that crawdad in my backyard. Or I've got it in my local home lake. Okay, this one is in my backyard. This is the the signal crawdad. And again, we're going to be talking about colors, but what's really important to know about these crayfish, and you can see this is the native range right here, and this is the introduced range. Okay, you can see it's really moved down into California. In fact, this map isn't even fully complete. After talking to the biologists, they actually have a lot of them out here in Montana, and they're starting to move east, but in the northern states. And I'll tell you why. This crawdad right here is probably one of the biggest, meanest, and hardiest crayfish. They have a really high water temperature tolerance range, but they don't breed as prolifically as the northern crayfish or the rusty crayfish. So in the bodies of water that they are dominant, tend to be cooler water they tend to be cooler water. Now, they are moving into California. They are found in the California Delta. I have personally seen them in the Bay Area. And my guess is that because they pump water out of the California Delta and into Southern California, that you're going to see them in more and more lakes in California because they are huge. They are, like I said, they have a much higher water temperature tolerance for both warm and cold. And they outcompete because they're bigger and stronger than most other species of crawdad. This is what we have in our Pacific Northwest. So this is what was kind of what got me started learning about crayfish and really doing that deep dive and getting that information. Okay, let's go on to the next one. The next one, so this one happens to be another one. It's just one of my favorite colors, and I'm actually I meant to save this one for when we talk about colors. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So this is another one that I get a lot of requests for, and let's see, who was it that was here from Missouri? John, you were here from Missouri. If you fish if you fish Table Rock Lake or Taneycomo, any of those bodies of water in southern Missouri or northern Arkansas, be on the lookout for this crayfish. Okay, I found two dominant color patterns, and this one baffled me the most. And I promise I'm going to come back and talk about this one when we start talking about color. But this one is a very dominant species or color of crayfish that is found in Table Rock Lake. This is the other version. I actually call this one Table Rock Craw. This is the other one that I call Purple Haze. But this is another dominant species of crayfish dominant color of crayfish that lives in Table Rock and, like I said, southern Missouri, northern Arkansas. And if I had to guess, I would have to guess that this species is related to the northern crayfish. If you look at it, they have those little yellow nodules right here on the claws. You see how it's blue? Even this one right here, the top of the claws on that one, the guy that sent it to me showed me, he did the same thing. He showed me the back, the side, and the belly in full sun. Happened to show me in a net because he says, this thing's just freaking huge. But he said the backs of them were blue and the undersides were more of that red look to them. But this color has, getting ahead of myself again. I'm going on to color next. I love talking crawdad color, and that's probably our favorite topic. If you guys get a chance, please make sure you like and share this video. I'm sure you have fishing friends that need to hear this information, especially what we're going to be talking about next about crawdad color. So this is the long pinchered crawdad. Like I said, southern Missouri, northern Arkansas. There's so many fishermen that fish those bodies of water that it's really important to be able to show this. I'm actually going to set that one aside. Now, this one is also a species that is an invasive species to Oregon. It's a ringed crayfish. The ringed crayfish, I've seen a couple of different colors, and this was actually, I didn't actually take these photos, but a buddy of mine that jumped down in the river down there did. And so these crawdads right here are, like I said, they're invasive into the Pacific Northwest. You can tell that they are ringed crayfish because they have a big black ring. So they have the orange tips on them, like many species of crawdads do, but they have a great big black ring on there. And then they also have a distinct marking on the back of their shell. This is a crawdad I have not matched yet, but I am working on it. I've come close on a few times, but like I said, like many of you know that you've used the lures before, to me, details matter. And I think if bass are eating these crawdads, they need to see those attributes. They need to be able to see the black, they need to be able to see the, especially since I don't do a lot of claws, they want to be able to see those markings on the shell. And they want to be able to see that color gradation on the side of that shell. Really important information. They're not really widespread. They're primarily in the small sections of the Midwest. It looks like northern Missouri, southern Missouri, northern, some of the states right here in the middle, and then of course in southwest Oregon. Again, this is just for your information. I want you to be able to know what species of crawdad you have in your neck of the woods. Now, I get to see me again. Anybody have any questions about any of that information? I don't see any questions. I'm going to grab a little drink of water here because throat's getting dry. Okay, now. Okay, since there's no questions, that's great. It means I'm being thorough. Okay, next, most important thing about crayfish. Let's talk about crawdad color. Now, remember at the beginning of this, I talked about crawdad color. Oh, make sure you're sharing this video because people will hate you if you don't share this video right now. You fishermen need to hear this information. And I'm not trying to upset anybody. I've gotten a little bit of hate mail going, well, you don't know what you're talking about. But I've talked to multiple biologists now. I got through to one, and he helped me get through to two more, and they've all confirmed the exact same information. So I know what I'm talking about. Remember what I talked about when I started this video? I was taught that crawdad color, they started off black in the winter, and then they molted and changed to green pumpkin or olive. Then they molt again and they turn brown. Then they molt again and they turn red. It's complete horseshit. Don't believe any of it. I know that many of you have lived your whole lives understanding that that's the way it is, but it's not true. Crawdad color is hereditary. I will repeat that. Crawdad color is hereditary. The crawdad that blends in the best will survive the longest and impart their genetics into the next generation of crayfish. Now, crawdads can be any color of the rainbow, and I've seen them. In fact, I got so deep into these crawdads that I joined pages that breed crayfish, and they can breed them in all sorts of colors. It absolutely floors me. So I'm going to repeat it one more time for those of you that just jumped on. Make sure you're sharing this. This is good information. Crawdad color is hereditary. The crawdad that blends in the best survives the longest and will pass their genetics on to the next generation. A crawdad can have, let's just use nice round numbers. A crawdad could have 100 babies. It's more like 500 probably, but a crawdad could have 100 babies. And they could be all colors of the rainbow. All those crawdads can survive if there's no predators in the water. But the one that's going to survive the longest is going to be the one that blends in with the rocks, or blends in with the grass, or blends in with the mud, or blends in with the sand. That's the crawdad that's going to survive and pass their genes on to the next generation. Let me show you a couple of pictures here. Okay, so I started doing this deep dive, and they actually have Facebook pages for crawdad breeders. That they breed. Look at the coloration on that thing. It's orange and like deep blue. You put that in one of my lakes, and it will stick out like a sore thumb. Look at that hot pink and purple. Absolutely beautiful crayfish. It would never survive in one of our bodies of water, but they still have them. Look at the colors of this one. You got yellow on the belly. You got maroon and pink. They're crazy looking, but these are for crawdad collectors. They're actually crawdad collectors out there that pay good money to have just wild colored crayfish. And I've literally seen them all colors of the rainbow in captivity. That's the key word, in captivity. Just because a crawdad can be a certain color doesn't mean it will survive out in the wild. This particular crawdad, I guarantee, has no natural predators. It will die old, it will eat really well, and it will die of old age. Yeah, Joe, you're right, morning dawn craw. That's exactly what it is. But that crawdad will never survive in the wild. What will survive in the wild, let's see, what I got next here? Okay. What survives in the wild, now this is that other photo of here, let me show you that virile crayfish here real quick. Or the northern crayfish. So that's a northern crayfish. And I happened to catch that out of Banks Lake. Okay. Right next door, see, that's the color that I found at Banks Lake. Right next door in Roosevelt, I've done really good with that crayfish pattern. But look at this, where this one was caught. That one was actually caught on a sandy, it was an underwater sandbar. Look at the coloration of how well that would blend into the sand. That's a key ingredient. That color on those sandbars was naturally selected to survive. This is very important information. Knowing what color, you can accurately predict what color crayfish are in bodies of water that you've never been to. The only thing you need to do is be able to get and actually look at the color of the rocks, the color of the dirt, whatever, in those lake, in the lake where you're fishing. Now, I'll give you an example. And this is what I'm really pushing to get this one matched, actually. But let me bring you back to this one again. This one right here is my Doomsday Craw. This year, I got the opportunity to go out to Knoxville, Tennessee, as many of you know. Went to Knoxville, Tennessee, went to the East Tennessee Fishing Expo, and we drove from Branson, Missouri, all the way over to Knoxville, Tennessee. And most of it was just so I could spend some time with my buddy Flint. But it was an opportunity to really see some of the countryside. And at least that's the way I went into it with. And those of you that follow me on Facebook and TikTok, you know that that's not the way it worked out. We got snowed in going out. We got iced in coming back. But the trip out there was great. But when we got to Nashville, we said, you know what, let's just power through. We'll get over to Knoxville and we'll get checked into our room, get checked in over at the convention center there. And I looked over on the side of the road as we're driving, and I go, Flint, look at the color of the rocks over here. And he goes, why? And I said, just look at them. And he goes, all right. And I said, how much you want to bet that my Doomsday Craw is one of my best-selling baits out here? And he goes, why do you say that? I said, because crawdad color depends on where they live, the color of the rocks that they live in around. I said, look at those rocks. I said, if the lakes have that color, and that's granite rock. I mean, it's a hard rock. I said, if the rocks are that color, how much you want to bet that the crawdads are that color in this part of the country? And he goes, well, let's see. First day of the show, I sold out of that pattern. Now, that brings me back to this one. And I was talking to Flint, and I said, Flint, that crawdad that you guys have in Table Rock, because he lives really close to Table Rock. And he goes, I said, do you have that color rock in Table Rock? And he goes, yeah, I do. Hello. That's why the dominant species, one of the dominant colors of crayfish in that lake is that one right there. Now, he said another part of the lake is made up of clay. And one thing I found out about crawdads that live around clay banks, they have a lot of purple in them. Hello. That one has a lot of purple in it. It's purple and brown, like a PB&J pattern. So if you've got a jig and you want to go out to Table Rock, match those two colors. You can call me to get the crankbaits, and then call Flint to get the crawdad match for that in the jig. Flint is over at Battle. He owns Battle Baits, by the way. But so those rocks were that color, and that is the color that I sold out of on the first day. But the second one that I sold out of the most was the rusty crayfish, and I think that's because we had a lot of people come down from those eastern states. Those guys are on another level when it comes to bass fishing. They really take their bass fishing seriously. And when they saw those patterns, they were just like, oh, got to do it. And they don't mind traveling to get quality custom painted baits or custom made baits. I think a lot of those guys that were out there going to that show wanted to see those balsa crankbaits. But I can't tell you how many of them from Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, Pennsylvania, all brought me balsa crankbaits to custom paint for them for their local species of crawdad. I spent literally a month straight of doing nothing but painting this pattern and this pattern when I got back from Knoxville. I came back with a large priority box full of baits to get painted up. And there's a reason why. Okay, so let's keep moving on here. So, again, this color crayfish is going to be one that is going to live on, around sand or that color rocks. If you've got that color rocks in your body of water, you can guarantee that you're going to find that color crayfish. The first time I ever went to Banks Lake, we pulled up, and as soon as when you come out of the little coulees out there, you pull up, and all of a sudden you see this lake in front of you, and it goes, a bunch of miles up to the right and a bunch of miles down to the left. But you look straight across, and you see a bunch of red rock out there. I knew that, even though I wasn't going to fish that tournament, that I was going to sell a lot of red crankbaits. Those guys in Eastern Washington had never seen it before, and they went, no freaking way. And I ended up selling out of my Columbia craw, and I also sold out of Norm, because those were the two dominant colors of crayfish in Banks Lake. Okay, here's sorry about that, guys. So this is another color of crayfish that was actually caught over in the Tri-Cities area. And this guy asked me to match this crayfish. And I don't have a picture of the the crankbait that I painted to match it. But look how well that color crayfish blends into those cobble rocks. This is a signal crawdad, and you can see the white joints on here. But look, it looks almost pink, but it blends in with that cobble rock. And he said he does really good along this stretch of river, and I don't even know exactly where it is, but it's all made up of that cobble rock, and that color crayfish blends in really, really well over there. Okay, let's talk about this one right here. I actually got a chance to get on a boat with a commercial crawdad fisherman on the Columbia, and this color crayfish, look how purple and blue that is. It absolutely floored me, and it happened to be on a clay bank that they pulled up this trap. Here's another one. It's also a signal crawdad. Look at the coloration. It's got blue, it's got tan. That crawdad blends in on sandbars out there on the Columbia River. And if you're not fishing, let me put it this way. So all these came out of the Columbia River, all four of these. But if you're fishing clay banks, you should be throwing something like this. If you're fishing sandy banks or the sandbars, you should probably be fishing colors like this. If you're fishing that cobble rock like this, you should probably be fishing a color like that. My point is, let it, whatever color crawdad you choose, whether you're throwing a jig, whether you're throwing a crankbait, whether you're throwing just a speed craw on a Texas rig, match your crayfish as best as you can to the rocks and environment that it lives in. Okay, here's another one that I caught out of the Molalla. Actually, I caught both of these out of the Molalla River on the same day. This one, look how blue that colored crayfish is. Look at that one. That one's wild. It's almost like it's almost like skin color. Like, I mean, look, it's almost the same color as my thumb. But you can see it's got a lot of blue joints. And so I actually asked one of the biologists about this, and what he said was, he says, in absence of all other environmental factors, crawdads will the blue color of crayfish is extremely common in crawdads in all species, but blue tends not to survive unless it can blend in. And so this particular blue crawdad I caught out of a little bit deeper of a pool, and I caught it off of a section where the bank was actually like really dark, like it was really dark colored rock, and it had all been mossed over, and so you really couldn't see what the color of the rocks were underneath it anymore. But that's where I ended up catching that one. But I asked him about it, and he says he actually will breed crayfish, and he says you can, out of the babies that come out, you'll see a lot of them that actually are blue, and they will survive as long as they don't get eaten up. And that's, again, it was proof that what he was saying was true. It literally blew my mind what he was telling me about crawdad color. Again, crawdad color is hereditary. The crawdad that blends in the best will survive the longest and pass their genes on to the next generation. Now, there are a couple of things that can alter the color of a crawdad shell, but it's temporary. And I asked him about this, and I'm going to tell you the story because I kind of had to eat crow here. It's called biofouling, and I called this biologist guy. In fact, Zach and I are friends now. But he says, I said, Zach, I caught this crawdad, and I look at that crawdad. Tell me that crawdad what color is that crawdad? It is black. And so I called him and I said, Zach, you said there was no such thing as a black crawdad. He goes, there's not. He says, I'll bet my paycheck on it. And I sent him that picture right there, and I said, see, black crawdad. He goes, nope, that crawdad is not black. He says, that crawdad is biofouled. Biofouling, and I said, what does that mean? He goes, biofouling it's the accumulation of microorganisms, minerals, and algae on a shell. And I said, talk to me about this. What does that mean? He said, crawdad shells can accumulate dirt, basically, on their shell, just like your truck does on a long road trip, or your boat does when it's out on the water. You get that scum line right along the bottom. I see a lot of you out there cleaning your boats after you're done. In fact, I often, especially with my boaters, I offer to help wipe it down, for that simple reason. Crawdads are the same way. Crawdads will grow, and they will eat, and they will accumulate microorganisms, minerals, algae. It can alter the color of the shell. But when the crawdad eats, what will happen is it'll molt, and it'll go back to the original color that it was. So this particular crayfish happened to be a red one, and I wish I had the photo of it. But the reason why I have these is that's kind of the back, and that's the belly, and that's a freshly molted crawdad where it's clean. There's no microorganisms, no minerals, no algae on them yet. But you can see the difference. Now, all of a sudden, ding, 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 it went off in my head. I went, oh shit. So what that guy told me about crayfish was in part true. Crawdads, and I'm gonna tease a little bit about the seasonal habits here. Crawdads in the wintertime don't eat very much. In fact, some of them will hibernate many of them will just go down to the bottom, climb under a rock, and just almost go completely catatonic when that water gets really cold. So during the wintertime, when that water temperature drops, really cold, and those crawdads don't quit moving around, you're gonna see those crawdads. They will accumulate the microorganisms, the mineral, the algae on their shell, and they're not moving. So they have no reason to eat. There's no reason to molt. They're just sitting there, just doing nothing. You can have black crawdads like the one in the picture below, especially early in the season. You can have black blue, you can have black red, you can have black green, you can have black with, red stuff growing on it. It's because those crawdads are so cold, they're just sitting under a rock praying for warm weather. So you can have that black color crayfish in the winter or early spring. When those crawdads come out and that water starts warming up, and I'm gonna refer to it again, but that magic number is 48 degrees. When that water temperature hits above 48 degrees, those crawdads come out and they are starving. They want to eat. Okay, they come out. They start eating. They molt. Now it also explains the green, or they could be brown, because if you fish in a lake that is like really silted in, for instance, and the bottom is kind of brownish green, and I'm sure many of you have gone swimming and kind of scooped up the bottom and look at the bottom and you go, it smells like caca, and you look at it and it's kind of a greenish brown color. You could have olive colored crayfish or green colored crayfish living in that mucky bottom. They started off black and then they went to green, because that's the area of the lake where you were catching those fish, right? If you go to an area that has brown rock, guess what? They're not going to be green there. They'll start off really dark, and then they will go to that, like what we talked about with, where'd it go? Like what we talked about, those mountains in Tennessee. It'll start off really, really dark, like the ones down below, and then that's the color that comes out. Once when they have molted. So the areas that you're fishing have a lot to do with what color crayfish you find. Now, as far as the red goes, red crayfish will tend to be in bodies of water that have high volcanic rock. That lava rock is what that's that red color crayfish. You won't find a red crayfish on a mucky, dirty bottom. It just won't happen. Now, you can have red claws, like on this little guy right here. That's a genetic trait on your Louisiana swamp cross. Let me get that photo out so you can see those. It's a genetic trait. When that crawdad is crawling along the bottom, you don't see the bottom of those claws unless that fish is sitting there nose up on it and that crawdad is trying to protect itself, right? Then you'll see the red. But I've actually gone down underwater and swam with these little suckers, because everyone keeps telling me, why don't you paint them backwards? Crawdads don't swim that way. Bull. They walk almost as fast forward as they do backwards. Absolutely floored me. If you go back and look at some of my posts, I actually posted something, it was about 2 months ago. It was really, really hot, and I just took the kids and we said, you know what, it's hot, let's get out of here. Went down to the river. I followed a crayfish for like 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes. And I was nose to nose with it sometimes. I got a camera, I got a snorkel on, and I'm sitting there staring at this crawdad. Not once did it put its claw, it kind of put its claws up, and then it started walking forward just like I wasn't even there. It wasn't worried about me at all. When they're crawling around like that, you don't see the bottom of those claws. It's not until they get into that really protracted pose of leave me alone that you start seeing some of those colors. In fact, let me show you again on these. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Who can tell me what color I have that color under. I know some of you know. This one right here I call olive mudbug. What do I call that one? Come on, Joseph. I know you know what color this is. No fair cheating and looking it up. Nobody tells me, I'm going to tell you right now. All right, I call this one peekaboo. The reason I call it peekaboo is when it's crawling along the bottom, you cannot see it. It is invisible to the naked eye when it's crawling along the bottom. It's not until it pops out of the, it pops off of the rocks or, it's moving around that all of a sudden it's like, whoa, there it is. But if it's just moving along the bottom and it's hard to see these crayfish. I've gone diving in some of the rivers down in, I've gone diving in the Delta. I've gone diving down in some of the bodies of water that have this in Oregon, and they are very, very difficult to see. You would think with all that red that you'd be really easy to find. They're not. Crawdads, these crawdads will blend in, and the one that blends in the best will survive the longest. In that body of water where I caught that one, it happened to be 10 Mile. That color is naturally selected to survive. Hopefully that helps. Okay, so we talked about biofouling. In fact, let me see, what's the next one? Oh, okay. So we talked about biofouling. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions about biofouling? Because I know that it's going to go, you guys are going to have tons of questions about this. I'm getting a drink of water for those of you that are still here. Okay, no questions means I did a good job of explaining it. Now, how can you use this information when you're out fishing? If you're out early in the season, you're out in, for us up here in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of times that bass fishing usually starts as soon as that water temperature gets into the low to mid 40s. 43 is my magic number. As soon as I see everything stable above 43, I'm out bass fishing because it's something absolutely incredible fishing. But when you get onto that crawdad bite at that 40, 47, 48, 49 degree, early in the season, start off with darker colors. Start off with your black blue. Start off with your really dark green pumpkin. You can do PB&J. You can do some different variations of it. Once those crawdads start molting and those fish really start chowing down on them, go to your more natural colors. You can go to the ones that really blend in to the rocks, to the weeds, to the sandbars, wherever you happen to be fishing. So take a look at that. It's really important to, I like, for instance, I will actually start with when I start cranking early in the season, I'll use my darker colors. I'll go to my original swamp craw. In fact, I'll show you. That's my original swamp craw that I've been painting for 20 years. I've made it a little bit better over the last couple of years, but this is my original one. And if this is a great color to start with early in the season, but I will do that with all of my crawdad colors. I have no problem using a black blue, black purple, really dark colors early in the season. The reason being is they're biofouled. As soon as they molt, that color almost like overnight stops working. Start looking at some of your colors that are more natural, the ones that blend in. So you're looking at colors, like for instance, one of my favorite colors this is my favorite color crawdad on the John Day River. But I will use a darker version of this early in the season until that water temperature gets into the high 40s. Once it gets into the high 40s, low 50s, then I'll switch to a little bit lighter version because those crawdads have molted and they're growing. I hope that makes sense. Rolly, thanks for joining. You were joining a little bit late, but I've given away some really great information. Thanks for joining. Again, I'm going to repeat this one more time. The crawdad color that blends in the best, or the crawdad that blends in the best, survives the longest. and they will pass their genes on to the next generation. This is something called biofouling that we've just spent some time talking about. Let's move on. So here's another phenomenon that I've seen. And the first time I ever saw this, one of the guys up here in Oregon sent me this photo that he says, I had a bass spit this up on the Willamette River. And I looked at that crawdad and I went, what the hell is that? I thought maybe it was, it had been gobbled up by a bass and it had been sitting in his stomach for a while, and then he barfed it up before he could completely digest it. I asked my buddy Zach about it, and he goes, no, it's not. He says, this coloration, if you look, he says, look at the coloration. Look how it goes along the length of the body. He says, these are fracture points on the shell. And that orange coloration, and I'm going to show you a couple different colors because I've seen it on almost every species of crawdad that I've ever seen. I've seen at least some that have these orange markings. I've seen them in a couple different ones, and I'm going to show you. But they're right along stress fractures on the shell. And that usually happens when the crawdad is young or when the crawdad shell is soft and it cracks. But the crawdad is still able to survive. What he explained to me was that it's like a Band-Aid for a crayfish. Now, you think, no way is that thing going to survive. No, they don't survive. But what happens is these crawdads, that when they live with this for a long time, they're living in deeper water. And in deeper water, that color is not orange and red anymore. That color is more brown. So it will still blend in with the bottom. Really important to know. If those crawdads come up shallow, guess what? They get gobbled up right away. Here's another version that was found. This one happened to be out of the Columbia River, where the Yakima dumps into the Columbia River, up there in the Tri-Cities area. This one right here was out of the John Day River. Look at this one. This one is a northern crayfish. Look at the orange markings on it. If you look real carefully, I'm gonna try to post all these pictures so you guys can see them. But look at the orange markings on the back of that shell. That's a northern crayfish where those orange markings are coming through. That's where the stress fracture is. And what he told me was, he says that those markings are kind of like a Band-Aid for a crayfish. It allows them to heal and keep on living despite having a crack in their shell. Look at this one. I believe it's hard to tell from the photo, but I believe this one is actually a swamp craw, a Louisiana swamp craw out of the Delta. Look at those orange markings on it right here. Look how wild that looks. It's all biofouled. You can see the algae forming on the side. Look at the orange markings on the side. I know one of you knows this one because you sent me the photo of this one. This one came out of, I believe this one came out of Celilo. And I don't know why, but I see a lot of that color. This is my BC craw pattern, but I see a lot of those crawdads, especially this year during the Drain Raider Open. Saw a lot of that color crayfish coming out of the Celilo pool. And the areas that we were finding the fish were generally deeper areas, even though we were catching them out of about 10 feet of water. But the areas were 15, 20, 25 feet. And but these bass were spitting up all these crawdads that had all that orange on them. That means those bass were living in a little bit deeper water, crunching on crawdads, right? And then you'd catch them as they move up shallow to feed on something else, and they'd spit up the crawdad on the deck of your boat or in your live well. I'm sure a bunch of you came back with stinky live wells. But it's important information to know. When you see these colorations on the crayfish that are being spit up, and I've actually caught them in traps. You drop those traps a little bit deeper water, and you can actually catch them this color. But that means those crawdads are living in deeper water. And it also means that those bass are living deeper. Even if you're catching them shallow, you're catching them on top water, those bass are staying in that deeper water and they're actively feeding down there. If you run into this and you start seeing this on your body of water, clue in and start fishing a little bit deeper, and I promise you, you're going to find something. You're going to find something special down there. Here's a couple more that were sent to me. In fact, here's that. I did this one because it shows the variation of color. This one was sent to me from Steve Fleming out on the John Day, and look how bright orange those are. That's a rusty crayfish. Now look at this one. That one's a really dark orange with really dark red on it. But they're different variations of the same phenomena. Okay, look at this one. This one's bright orange. Somebody sent me this out of the Delta, and they go, "Can you match this?" And I went, "Hey, let's rock and roll." You know, so there are certain color patterns, and I'm sure bells are going off in your head right now. Oh man, that's why that jig works so well, or that's why that that twisted Senko color that I like to throw works so well, or that's why that Ned rig works so well. It's because of this phenomenon. Okay, here's another rusty crayfish. Look at this. These are 3 rusty crayfish caught out of the same river. But look at this. This one actually doesn't even have any orange on it at all. It's more of like a tan color. And this has to do with what's the minerals that are around in the water that can make up this like this protective patch for the shell. The way it was explained to me as being like a Band-Aid for the crawdad. And it can be all over the country. And every species of crawdad, you can find that variation. And the trick is to, when you find a crayfish, don't just kick it back in the water. Take some photos. Start matching those crayfish, and I promise you it's going to make such a big difference. Okay, so I hope that was insightful for you. I have one more section. I know I'm going a little bit over an hour right now. Thanks for sticking with me. Anybody have any questions before I go on? Rolly, man, thanks for jumping on. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to get your hands on some of these lifelike looking crawdads or crankbaits in the crawdad patterns, jump on my website, willametweaponlures.com. Use that code TikTok. I mean, no, it's not TikTok. Craw, C-R-A-W at checkout. And you can get a discount on some of these really lifelike looking crawdads. I've got that northern crayfish, rusty crayfish, molten lava craw, got the BC craw, got the Doomsday craw. In fact, I'm running really low on Doomsday. I'm going to start painting this one actually this coming week. Because I've been doing, like I said, I've been doing lives on TikTok, and this color sells really well. Got some swamp craws. This one sells really good too. That one's going good. Again, use that code CRAW, C-R-A-W at checkout. You know, there's a section right when you go to checkout, and it'll say enter coupon code or discount code. Type in the word CRAW, C-R-A-W, and you get a discount. I really appreciate the support, guys. Okay, so let's move. Is there any questions? I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to type up your questions. No questions? This is unbelievable. I didn't think I was that good at teaching. All right, no questions. That's great. That means that you guys are learning. You're absorbing. I'm going to leave this video up for a while so you guys can watch it and absorb it. Take your notes. Get going on it. Okay, last section: seasonal habits of crayfish. These are some of the series of questions that I had to ask because as a fisherman, I want to know why it's so important during different times of the year. Let's start off in winter. Wintertime, those crawdads will tend to go deep. I've actually been on sections of the Clackamas River, and for those of you that have ever been on the Clackamas River, it's crystal clear and it's freezing cold. But we've gone swimming in some of the deeper pools in the Clackamas River, and I get out there with my snorkel and my I need to get some photos. This summer I actually got a photo cover or a camera cover so that I can take my camera underwater and not feel like I'm worried about it. But we find on these sections of the bank where there's all these holes that it looks like they drilled it in. And my son Nathan, he loves to go do this with me because he likes to actually catch them. He goes, Dad, those things look like crawdad condos. And I got to thinking, I'm like, that's probably where those crawdads live in the wintertime. They either go deep and hide under a rock where it's safe and they can just sit there catatonic and wait for it to warm up. Or they'll dig themselves into these holes and wait, and then wait again. They're still waiting until that water temperature warms up. But the point is, they're barely moving. If it would take a lot, I mean, if you ever seen on the best way to explain it is on the Willamette. If you get a really crazy rainstorm, the river will blow out. Right? I mean, there's so much water moving through there. Okay, it turns the bass bite to poop. It's like you see that, I just turn around and go home. I'm not fighting that stuff all day. I've done it before, and I enjoy the camaraderie among the other fishermen, but it makes the fishing so tough. Because you got this just wall of mud. That's about the only thing that can move crayfish from their areas. I mean, they're just going to sit there and just wait it out. Okay, so you can find crayfish, but they're barely moving. They don't want to move. Now, let's get that magic number, man. What was that magic number I said? I mentioned the magic number was 48. When that water temperature gets to that 47, 48, those crawdads start moving. They know that springtime is coming and they need to start eating. They've hardly been eating all winter long. They're just like the bass. The bass got to get moving too. The bass got to get moving. The bass got to start moving. The crawdads got to start moving. The bass have already been moving because as soon as that water temperature hits that 43, those bass start chowing down on yellow perch. Those yellow perch start spawning. They're easy meals. They don't have to spend a lot of energy chasing spawning perch, right? Well, with the crawdads start crawling out when that water temperature hits 47, 48, 49 degrees. And those bass are like, oh, it's feeding time. That's when I start getting all the orders for all the crayfish patterns. I know, without even being on the water, that's one of the joys of having my job. I know when that water temperature reaches 48 degrees because you guys start buying crawdad colored crankbaits. And those fish start feeding up big time. They start eating the crayfish. The crawdads will come out of their winter haunts. They go out, they start warming up, they start eating, and they will molt. Crawdads will tend to go as shallow as they possibly can while still feeling safe. Crawdads inherently are shallow water creatures. There are some, like those ones that I showed you a little while ago, that have those orange markings on them that have adapted to live in deeper water. But it has to be oxygen rich. It can't be stagnant, nasty water. What we found, and I asked Zach about this too. I said, hey, what happens in lakes where, when the water temperature reaches like 80 degrees? He says those crawdads will go so freaking shallow, or they'll start keying in on areas where, there's water movement, where there's oxygenated water. That's really important. And one thing he was telling me, he says a lot of times they'll go up into inches of water so they can actually breathe the air outside. If you've ever been night fishing and you see raccoons walking along the shoreline, guess what they're eating? They're crunching on crawdads. And we've actually seen them where we're sitting there, we do a spotlight in the summertime, and they're sitting there crunching on crawdads. You see a bunch of crawdad shells all over the place. So springtime, they come out, they molt, and the females have been holding their eggs all winter long. Those females are staying underneath those rocks, and they start they start letting, as the eggs are matured, the eggs are gone, and then now they start feeding. So you got a feeding frenzy on the crawdads of the crayfish eating. In turn, you have bass that will start eating crayfish as well. Summertime, those crawdads will tend to go into their into heavier cover where you've got fresh water, fresh oxygenated water moving through. That's why flipping is really good. Flipping crawdad colored jigs, flipping in the grass, flipping all sorts of stuff. All the creatures use grass and rock to survive, right? Very key ingredient during the summertime. Those crawdads are active. They're molting multiple times during the summer. The more a crawdad eats, the more often it's going to molt. It's simple as that. In a body of water where there's not a lot of food for a crayfish, you might only get 1 or 2 molts during the summertime. Now, let's talk about molting real quick. When those crawdads molt, they will hide under a rock. They will grab that shell that they just molted and they will eat it again so that they can reabsorb all of the nutrients that they just lost from losing that shell. But it'll grow into that new shell. As soon as their shell hardens, they'll go back out and start doing their thing again. It's really a neat thing. Now, fall is when those crawdads start on their migration again. They start migrating back to their winter areas. Now, the way we use it for our bass fishing, now, many of you, and I can't be the only one, many of you are with me where we tend to, in late summer and early fall, key in on those bait fish, right? Whether it be shad, whether it be perch. When we were at Potholes at the end of August, unbelievable how many perch were cruising along the banks. Birds were diving on them. Those fish were not really interested in eating crawdads, even though they did, because I caught some on crayfish patterns. But those fish were really keyed in on bait fish. Late summer, early fall, those fish key in on bait fish. In late fall, a lot of those bait fish start going deep. You start getting those really cold nights, and you start getting those, the afternoons that are nice, but those bait fish start going deep or they start moving. Bass still got to eat. What are they going to key in on? It's almost like it's overnight. Those bass make that move from bait fish to crawfish, to crawdads. And if you're able to take advantage of that, that jig bite, the crankbait bite, it's a magical time to be a power fisherman. You can really rail on them. And it's because those crawdads are predictable. They start moving. Those bass really got to pack on those pounds. And one of these days I'm going to do a seminar about the forage base and what I've seen, what I've learned about the forage base. Because I've done the entire forage base, not just crayfish, but I'm looking at bluegills, trout, all in the same way. I'm looking at seasonal movements, and how it relates to bass fishing. But those crawdads are very predictable. And like I said before, they are calorically beneficial to bass. They don't have to work very hard, and they get a lot of calories for very little work. Now, one little parting thing. When you're out on the water and you start catching bass, our favorite thing to do is to sit there and go, look at my bass thumb. I caught a lot of bass. We like getting that bass thumb, right? And I've had days in the past where you catch 40 or 50 fish and your thumb is just bleeding, right? And then I've had the similar days where it's like you caught that many fish and you're like, yeah, I caught some fish. It was fun. But your thumb's not bleeding. There's a reason. When bass are eating crawdads, their teeth tend to be very dull. And if you look in the back of their mouth, the mouths tend to be really red in the back. It's kind of like eating too much Captain Crunch cereal. If you eat too much Captain Crunch cereal, the inside of your mouth gets raw, right? Same thing with the bass. Their teeth tend to be dull, and the back of their mouths are red. So pay attention to the fish you're catching, whether it be in the springtime or in the fall. Pay attention when you see duller teeth and redness in the back of the mouth or in the back of the throat. Pull out those crawdad colored crankbaits. Pull out those crawdad colored jigs, and your Texas rig, speed craws, and go catch yourself some fish. I hope that this was helpful to all of you. If you guys have questions, I'll stay online with you for a few minutes and chat. But if you don't, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for tuning in and learning something. Please share this video with someone that needs to hear it and someone that needs to watch it. I do have these. I am going to be running a sale on these. For those of you that watch this, use that code CRAW, C-R-A-W, and on your favorite color crayfish patterns, and you can get them off the website at willametteweaponlures.com. Anybody else have any questions before I sign off? I appreciate the participation. This is fantastic. You want me to just show off more lures? Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it, man. I'm hoping that you'll be able to use some of that information on some of the bodies of water that you go to, and that way you can really get dialed in. I know those crankbaits you like to throw, and being able to have them in a couple of different colors when those fish are, say, keyed in on, for instance, on the rusty crayfish, for instance, they can be really important and really put that extra quality bass in the boat for you. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. This is my molten lava craw. Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to use that code craw at checkout if you want to grab yourself some of these. This is my dozer, my 2.5 dozer size square bill. I've got a 1.5. This is my Mako size. This one's in that northern crayfish pattern. I can paint all of these. Thank you, Shannon. Appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. This is my depth charge. This one, I call it Shasta Craw. I call it Shasta Craw because Mark Lassane posted a video or posted a picture of a spotted bass that had spit up a crawdad that looked just like this when he was out there at Shasta. And I went, you know what? I'm taking it as a challenge. I got to paint this thing because everyone was telling him, oh, you got to use this. Oh, you got to use that. And I went, no, this is what you got to use. And if you look at, in fact, if you look at it, there's the crawdad right there. If you take a look at your Bass Angler magazine, you see my mug right there, but that's the actual crayfish that I matched, and that's the pattern I painted to match it. And that was the one that was shown that he posted. And actually, he sent me a couple now that I've matched for him. And there's a lot of guys out there that go, man, that's incredible. Here's that Table Rock craw. If you're out there fishing Table Rock, Missouri, or anywhere in northern Arkansas, that depth charge is a money bait. It's absolute money. Thank you for that, Steve. Feel free to ask questions, guys. Like I said, I'm gonna stay online for a few more minutes. And if you guys have questions about any of the material that I covered, feel free to ask it. Make sure, like I said, make sure you're sharing this. Here's that peekaboo pattern. Rolly, yeah, make sure I covered a bunch of information before you popped on. I appreciate you joining, but yeah, make sure you watch this again. This is that peekaboo pattern. And I again, the details matter to me in the crankbaits. I add that little bit of red because when that bait ricochets off of a rock or off of a stump or something, and they see that flash of red, it's just like on that crayfish, on that crawdad I showed you earlier. Really important information. This is my captor model. This is probably my best-selling model of crankbait. It's similar to a Norman Deep Little N. Again, this is that olive mudbug pattern, but there's that flash of red, just like on those claws. To me, the details matter because I'm used to fishing clear water. Anybody else have any questions? All right, if there's no questions, I want to thank everybody for their time. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you please share this with all of your friends. This will help everyone be a better fisherman. And if you want to grab a few lures while you're at it, make sure you use that code CRAW at checkout, C-R-A-W, and you can get your discount on some lures for you. I hope everyone has a great night. Thanks for joining me. Make sure you share this. We'll talk to you real soon.